I forgot I even had these. These are the cryo sheets from Thermal Grizzly, DeBauer's company. And basically it's designed to replace thermal paste. I'm used to using this big old giant just of thermal paste. So I figured today we would just kind of give these a shot and see if, well, how well they perform, I guess. The Air 903 Max Mid-Tower case from Montech features a 51% porosity ventilation rate, pre-installed HP 140mm ARGB fans, and 21 built-in RGB modes for a premium feel without the premium price. Not interested in RGB? Then the Air 903 base is just for you with its clean aesthetic and incredible component support at a price that won't have you crying. To see the full list of Air 903 specs from Montech, follow the link in the description below. So today I'll be putting these on my 13900K, which is my test bench. And it's gonna basically be kind of going up against the Kingpin cooling. So KPX, or the Kingpin Extreme Cooling thermal paste, is what I pretty much like exclusively use. And kind of like, here's some proof of it where I've got, lots of it. Each one of these tubes will go a long way. I use it on GPUs, I use it on CPUs, I use it on memory modules, I use it everywhere. But the benefit to using like a graphene sheet is the mess. Because remember, this is all a liquid, right? So it comes out goopy, like you just saw right there when I took the cap off, it's like, but anyway, it gets messy. You put the cooler down, you tighten it down, it squishes out the sides, it go over the sides of the CPU, and you gotta clean it, it gets all ugly. But the concept with these is that you'll put them on, they'll still fill the gaps. The cryo sheet is basically designed at a Z-axis where the cooling molecules, I don't know the science behind it, basically are designed in a Z-axis format to help create a better thermal transfer. I didn't know there was grain or direction to cooling, but apparently that's what they advertise, so that's what I'm saying. But I also noticed there's different sheets. So there's a 24 mil by 12 mil, there's a 33 by 33, and a 38 by 38. So obviously these are designed for different size CPUs. So 24 by 12, if we take a look at this, it's actually intended for like delidded CPUs. This is my delidded 13900K here. I won't be using that today because I do not have, well, I do have technically Singularity Computers Direct Die GPU or CPU block, but that's not what I'm using today. But you can see the size of the sheet right there. So that's obviously intended to be used in like a direct die cooling situation, which I guess again would be really nice to keep it from getting all over the place in there. That square right there might be kind of hard to see. That's clearly going to be for like AMD. Let me grab one of their CPUs. So if we compare the size of the sheet, this is like an old school Ryzen. You can see it doesn't fully cover. So I think the 38 by 38 would work for this. Try not to touch it. Okay, stay in between the sheets. Thank you. That's what I say. That's what I tell my wife. Just kidding. Yeah, that would work for AM5 pretty good. It would also work for older Intel. As you can see, it fully covers that. I have no idea how fragile this stuff is. And as you can see, I have a finite. So let's look at the 38 by 38. Yeah, that's a big boy right there. Yeah, that'll clearly cover it, but you're gonna have it hanging off the sides as well. Maybe it was just easier for him to make it in a square, that way it's got better applications. But as you can see, that will fully cover, but it will dangle off the side. It's not gonna matter, but this would also work with like X99 CPUs and stuff, which are a bigger IHS, Xenons and all that, but this won't work with Threadripper. Threadripper is like way too big. So this is my rig we're gonna use, the 13900K on a 360A Nucleus AIO from EK Waterblocks, non-RGB, very basic, nothing crazy about it. GPU doesn't matter, this is just on here for display. Yeah, it's just a 3080, no big deal.
TI.
This one's not the TI.
Shiny.
No, it's not the TI.
What?
No. The edge right here would be shiny if it was.
Oh, it's not shiny enough. Never mind.
Yeah, it's pleb one.
Sucks.
Anyway, couple things. The fans are static at 75%. Now I'm trying to control as many variables as possible. However, I do not have a locked voltage, but I do have a locked max voltage. Now I am running ASUS's AI optimizer on this. So it's not going to be as apples to apples as I'd like, meaning if I'd gone in and locked down all the perimeters, but I'm kind of approaching this in if you're a regular guy, a regular Joe, that most people do not go in and lock down their frequencies and lock down their voltages and such, but they'll just go, okay, I'm gonna go from thermal paste to this. So what happens? That's what I'm kind of looking at. Now I wanna point out that it's probably gonna be extremely consistent, but the AI optimizer is actually performing really, really well. So you can see right now, the system while idling is at 1.462 volts, 1.45, that's a lot of voltage. But look at the temps on the cores right now. So this thermal, or this graphene pad has a lot of work cut out for it because I am idling in the 20s on the P cores and obviously in the 20s on the E core. It's also at 6.1 gigahertz single core, and it will go all core 5.6, but look, the rest of the cores are chilling at E cores are at 4.6, and then we're at 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, or excuse me, 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, and then 6.1 on the top 3 cores. But watch what happens when I go ahead and put this under load. My most recent run was a 40,129. Watch what happens with the voltage. It's gonna drop. 1.18 volts. This, and it's at 73, 74 on the package. Cores are in the low 70s, high 60s. 5.6 gigahertz all core. Could push that higher if I wanted. This is a magic chip. Very rarely do I get one that's actually really good. This one is really good. That just ran a 40,251. I just went higher than where we just were. So yeah, what we need to do right now though, on our baseline, is I'm going to start the test. I'm going to run a 10-minute loop on this. And then what we're gonna compare here is one, where our max temperatures land. But I also have to pay attention during the test to see what's happening with the voltage. Because if the temp comes down, but the voltage came down, that means it was a result of voltage and not the graphene pad. This is why locking down the voltage would be great, but I can't go in and set a static voltage, because what's happening here is right now while the CPU is not under load, you can see my cores are boosting up pretty high right now, 5.8, right now 6.1. If I were to go in and lock the voltage at 1.18 or whatever it's doing under load conditions, then obviously it will crash, it won't even boot. So I have to allow it to have that fluctuation just because of the way the CPU is set for our test bench. But this is a pretty good real world scenario test where it's like, what happens if you take this in a real world functioning system, put this in and then see what happens. It may not be the best apples to apples comparison, but it is still a result. All right, so I'm gonna start the test right here, 10 minutes. Multi-core start. After it starts, I'm gonna clear my min-max. Clear min-max, there we go. Package is at 77, 78 right now. Now we're hitting like 78 on a couple of the cores. The reason why we have to let this run is because we have to let the coolant get to equilibrium. That's what we're really going for here, is what happens when the coolant's at its max temperature. But realistically, I care less about the score and I care more about what's happening with our max temperatures. Like our package was about to hit 80 for a second there. Oh no, it's hitting 80 at 5.6 all core. Oh, it just crashed. All right, so because of that crash, we did a slight tweak. I basically bumped the LLC up one level. So now we're hitting 1.2 volts, which is fine. But I bumped the fans from 75% up to 100, just to keep the temps, I don't know. I guess I could have let them get hotter, but I'm trying to keep it as stable as possible. But anyway, you can see right now, slightly more voltage, 1.203 towards the end of the test, 1.197. But towards the end of the test, there it is, 1.2204. And then it will go up in between the runs when it restarts. So now we're off and running, still 5.6 gigahertz all core, 4.3 on the E core. E cores are at 65C, hottest core is at 68. Our hottest core right now on the P cores is, P cores max says 79, but the individual core doesn't show it. Anyway, shows the max is 79. We can go from there. So, all right, we're off and running. We're already past where we were. We haven't crashed. In terms of the score, that last one was a 40,197, so we didn't lose any performance with it. All right, let's let it go and get the data. Not the most scientific way to do it, but I want to show you what the ambient air temp is in here. It's 19.2. Yeah, this couple intends to be used while touching something, but it still works pretty good this way. Watch, if I touch it, look at that. So, but now it'll take time to bleed off that heat. If I wave it around, it'll come back down. So 19.2 is what the current ambient air temperature is. So that way you guys can see, you know, and there's another point of data. Air temp, ambient temp obviously matters with cooling your system. All right, so we are about to finish. 20 seconds left in the test. It has not crashed. The max package temp achieved was 82C. Max cores though was between, well, 80 was the max core right there. And then everything else is in the upper 70s. I think that one hit 80 right there as well for a second. Voltage, you can see it's really consistent. We'll show you as this run completes because it just finished the 10-minute. This is the last run. 1.198, 1.197. It will go up to about 1.205 towards the end of the test. Anyway, the test just completed, and that last was a 40,211. It's extremely consistent. It stayed around that 40,200 and some change mark the entire time. I need to cool off this sensor a little bit again. You know, I have an actual better tool for this. Okay, there it is, 19.2. So it didn't change, obviously. If I blow on it right now, that's not gonna do any good because I'm obviously full of hot air. We'll use the correct tool here, the manometer. All right, moving on. Now that the system has cooled down a little bit, I want to let it idle here to bring the coolant temp down some. So that's part of the problem with thermal paste. As soon as I took it off, it just started like everywhere. I mean, this is clearly one of the cons to thermal paste is the cleanup. So it's not just a potential thermal benefit depending on the thermal paste you're running. There's no possible way that thermal paste could get down inside the pins if you were to take the CPU off and you got all this hanging over the side. So there's a lot of pros to the idea of this as long as it performs well. One of the other major pros is going to be the fact that it won't dry out over time, whereas thermal paste can and will, because it's, especially if it's an alcohol base, alcohol evaporates, right? And so that's why eventually the thermal paste sometimes you see gets super hard. And I'm not gonna clean that what's down in there on the sides right now because I don't want to take the CPU out in between these tests right now, but I am making sure that I get every single bit of the thermal paste off the CPU because we don't want to contaminate our test by getting any of that residue on there. Whatever hangs over the side isn't going to be a big deal because that's not touching anything important anyway. But same goes for the block here. I've got to get every single bit of this residue off, which is going to be quite a lot of it. Now, the whole point of thermal paste, and as I move this around, you can see there's a lot of scratches in all the metal, like especially the copper blocks and stuff, they're really soft. But even on the IHS, there's a significant amount of microscopic peaks and valleys in the metal. And all thermal paste does is fill those peaks and valleys to get better contact between the two pieces of metal for better heat transfer. So that's all that the pad has to do as well. But I gotta get my back plate put back on there. Actually, you know what? I forgot how much I love this test bench because it just pressure fits in there. So I'm wondering how much this thing's gonna slide around when I go to install it. Hopefully not too much. Let's see if I can do this without touching it, because it's not gonna like stick down or anything like that. In fact, it's got a little bit of a curve to it. It's also fairly fragile, so you could rip it pretty easily. Fingernail. Okay, so that's lined up. A little bit of surface tension right now, kind of making it sort of stay in place. As long as I'm able to put the cooler down and not be twisting it all around, we should be good. Don't let it move. Because the way this video is gonna end is we're gonna be taking it off and seeing what happened to it. Like, did it rip? Apparently, according to Phil, who's researched this particular topic a lot because of like the Ally and all that and the Steam Deck and whatnot, a lot of these companies are using these kinds of pads now, but that they liquefy as they get hot, but then in their more of like a room temp state, they're very solid. The question I have is this a one-time use? That's what I want to know. Like, if once you take the cooler off, kind of like with the AMD GPUs, is it done? Or can you use it again? What happens with the AMD GPUs is they tear. However, the AMD GPUs are also a chiplet design, so there's different peaks and valleys in there that get compressed. Whereas this is just a single rectangle giving us our IHS. So a little bit of a different scenario there. So we kicked on our HVAC to make sure the temperatures stay as close, because it's getting hotter throughout the day. So at 19.4 right now, so we just want to keep that in mind. I'm going to hang that over the edge so air can flow through it. Okay, thermal pad is in there. Our initial temperatures are all pretty much the same. Our package is idling in the high 20s, low 30s, depending on the load that's kind of bouncing around. But I want to see what the initial startup temperature is. That'll tell me right away if good or bad is gonna proceed what happens next. If I start it and it's higher off the bat, then that's gonna be a bad thing. Boom. Package temp, 67, 72, 73. Exactly where it was with the thermal paste, 74, ooh, 76. I feel like it went to 76 a little bit quicker initially. We're at 5.6 all core. On the P cores, 4.3 all core, and we're at the exact same voltage. That's good. I was hoping that there wouldn't be any variable change in there when it comes to the voltage and stuff. So this now gives me a realistic A/B comparison, even though the variables were not locked down like they should. 40,211 was the very last run of the 10-minute mark last time. We're at 40,170. Margin of error, honestly, but if it hits lower in like the 40,100 consistently versus the 200, there's a few different reasons that could be. But we'll talk about that at the end. All right, 17 seconds left in the test, 19.1 C air temp. So that's air temp's not gonna be a factor in this. Check this out. We are actually slightly higher on the voltage at the start of the next run. See if it'll start before this test ends. 1.204 at the start, then it drops to 1.198, then 1201, 1197, 1196. I'm only bringing that up because of the fact that we are on average about 1 C hotter. Still the max package was 80. So that's exactly the same, to be honest. Our wattage draw is still the same at 268 watts. That's nuts, like that is actually 268 watt draw giving us this performance. But look at the score. It's actually slightly better, 40,235 versus 211. Margin of error, that means nothing, but the point is we lost nothing. That's a good thing, right? So let's talk about this pad real quick before we shut it down as it's cooling down now. So it is now performed on par with, I already put it away, the KPX, which I use everywhere. There's a positive and a negative to this. One, the instructions actually say to cut it down to size. Obviously I didn't cut it down to size, but as you see, that didn't affect anything negatively here. KPX, like all thermal paste, is messy. You have to get good mounting pressure and it squishes out the side, and you saw how it goes all down the side of the CPU, and if you get really too liberal with it, as you take it off, it can goop, like I showed with the cooler, down into the socket, and that's a bad thing. Now, it's all hard to clean. You can actually just kind of douse the crap out of it with isopropyl alcohol. That'll break down the thermal paste, and you can flush it out pretty easily without ever having to touch it, because those pins are very delicate. The graphene pad, by the way, even though it's a solid pad, it does not liquefy. It's not that thermal pad that turns into a liquid, like a phase change pad. This is a graphene solid pad. The higher the mounting pressure, the better. It's also conductive, whereas KPX and other thermal pastes are not. So even though the thermal paste can get everywhere, as long as it doesn't cause physical damage in the socket if you get it down in there and you just went nuts with it, if this somehow were to, when you're putting it on, sort of slip and maybe touch something, which would be actually kind of hard where the socket and stuff is, it's just worth pointing out it is conductive. All right, so now that our scores were extremely consistent, let's shut it down and see what happens when you take it off. Because as long as it doesn't get damaged, I would have to assume it's possible to reuse it. And that's what I want to see right now. If I take it off right now and it doesn't look damaged in any way, I'm gonna put my cooler back on it and then run the test again and see what happens. Because it's 25 bucks for that one pad. And if that's a one-time use, for most people, that's not gonna be a problem because they put their computer together and they leave it until they have to do something. And usually the only reason they take off their cooler is either to reapply thermal paste because it started drying out and the temp started going up, or they've upgraded their cooler or something. If you have to pay 25 bucks every time you go to reuse it, like I'm gonna be sad right now if it's not reusable because I only have 3 of this size. Hey, look at that. It stayed in one piece. Check that out. You can see the contact pressure of where the CPU was. You can also see there's a slight tear right there. So I think as long as I can get this back down without that tear being in the way, should be okay. Because they really do want me to trim that down to size, but obviously I didn't and I'm not gonna. So let me get this, but look at that, there's no cleanup. You can even see the imprint of where the CPU was, which is kind of nice. As I'm reinstalling this too, there's one thing I want to point out, and that's going to be that obviously the easiest installation orientation for this is going to be having your system flat like this, because If it's sliding all around, if it's vertical, trying to put the cooler together like that, that's gonna be it's not gonna go too well. So you're obviously gonna want, if you're installing this in a motherboard maybe that's already in a case, you're clearly gonna want to lay it down on its backside like this. Otherwise you're gonna have a heck of a time trying to get it to not slip out of place. So initial temps on the startup look pretty much exactly where I expect them to be. Oh, and we are up 1 degree, a little over 1 degree in ambient right now. 73, 74. Core clocks are exactly where they were before. Wattage draw is exactly where it was, 266. It's a 40,200, so it's only 35 points below. And that, again, that's always gonna fluctuate. Like there's always gonna be plus or minus like 20, 30 points in this test. And yeah, I'm also aware Cinebench R24 is out. We might do a video about it. But this test is still plenty good for the AVX instruction set to put heat into the CPU and test things like thermals right here. So it already has a better proposition value and cost by the fact that I've at least reused it once. And we think that little tear probably happened because I didn't trim the side. So it wasn't flat against the CPU. As it hangs over the side, it has to create that radius, right? So it tore like that. I've seen these types of pads. I've always seen the phase change ones though that have like a finite life to them still and can potentially dry out because they are liquid based. This is graphene. This will last as long as your system is together, or until you physically damage it. It will not if I ran the system for 5, 10 years, that pad will be as good as it is today in 5 or 10 years. That's the craziest part about it. It will not dry out, it will not degrade. Now, if I could use it twice, that brings the cost of it down to $12.50. But still, that's way more expensive than, because it's about $5 for a 1-use tube of thermal paste. So you'd have to use it 5 times to get your full money worth, but most people are not tearing their systems apart 5 times. I mean, we do around here because we test product, but most people don't have to do it except for once every couple years. Okay, well, there you go. I'll be honest, I didn't realize I had these until I was going through the shelf and I'm like, when did we get cryo sheets? And I know he sent these to me a long time ago, so I don't know how long they've been out. I know it's not a new product by any means, but it's, I'm glad I took a look at it because I feel like I'm gonna stock up on these and start using these on our test benches and stuff just because of how often we change out CPUs. I'm tired of cleaning thermal paste that gets everywhere. And the cool thing is this means at the end of the day, I won't be putting CPUs away that look like this, where there's still thermal paste in the crevasses of it because I'm too lazy to clean it out. Like every single one of our CPUs have thermal paste gunk in there. That won't be the case with these. Look, like, I don't know, this one I actually cleaned pretty good. But whatever, that's awesome. All right, guys, thanks for watching. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.